now. Listen up.
3, 2, 1.
It's showtime.
That's great.
This is ridiculous.
99.3 The Truth.
You can't handle the truth right now.
Ooh.
That was the stupidest thing I ever heard.
Let's do it.
Hit it.
It's time for Mac's World.
And here we go.
Everybody, let's get it started. Let's get it started.
Call Mac 244-0077 or text 809-0993.
It's showtime, everybody. Showtime.
Exclusively on 99.3 The Truth.
It's 6 minutes after the hour of 4 o'clock on the third day of January in the Lord's year 2017. This is a live program being aired to you live from our studios high above the plains of Iowa in the top floor of the Merle Hay Mall Tower, which is interesting. I don't say this very often, but we are geographically the third highest place in the state of Iowa, and the first two are over in Dubuque. You would think that standing on the top floor of the principal building or something like that would be higher than a 6-story building in Merle Hay Mall, but topographically we are the third highest place in the state. And that's important to us just because of the electronics of having a radio station. But glad to be here and glad to have you involved. Your voice is always welcome at 515-244-0077. Or you can text us at the Service Legends Truth Talk text line at 809-0993, and that's area code 515. And Bob, I believe you have a text for us. By the way, our guest today is the distinguished Rabbi David Kaufman. And we're going to have a conversation a little bit about my experience with the Palestinians and just try to get more answers, because now God's got me working on this thing in my head. I can't get it out of my head. So we're going to talk about that. But you've got a text for us?
Yeah, and it's kind of two parts. I'll read it both. When Israel walls in the West Bank and prevents the Palestinians from entering Jerusalem, they are targeting civilians. And the next statement is, the two-state proposal promoted by the past 5 American presidents, one for Israel and one for Palestine, is a pathway to peace in the Middle East. Maybe when Obama is named head of the UN, this will come closer to fruition.
Do we know who that was?
No.
Okay. Thank you very much for sending that. It sounds like somebody pretty informed. What do you think about that?
Well, look, I think that preventing civilians from attacking other civilians is not targeting civilians. The reality is the Palestinians are still officially at war with Israel. They haven't made it. They don't have a peace agreement. There are terrorists in the West Bank, and they need to be kept away from going after Israeli civilians to harm them. So, I mean, that's the simplest fact. Most of the barrier is actually a fence. It's not a wall. The places where it is a wall are to prevent snipers from just firing guns across the border and killing people. So, there's a reason there's a security barrier. It saved a lot of lives on both sides, because not only has it saved Israeli lives from being targeted by Palestinian terrorists coming out of the West Bank, but it's also saved the lives of all the people who would be involved in any conflict if the Israelis had to send soldiers into the West Bank. So,
well, what kind of spurred the comment? It was directed at me, the text, mentioned my name, I guess. But I had made the statement that when these peace processes come in, Hamas, Hezbollah, somebody torpedoes the process, they send people over with suicide vests on, kill civilians, or they end up launching rockets into Israel from places inside of Palestine, targeting civilians. It's clear. So when Israel retaliates, civilians get killed, but I would say that Israel is not with purpose targeting civilians.
No, Israel never targets civilians. The Palestinian terrorists do target civilians. You have not had rockets coming out of the West Bank. You've had rockets coming out of Gaza. Right. There's a big difference there. The reality of the peace process is that there's no agreement right now that the Palestinians can make that their leadership is going to be willing to accept. The peace process is simply impossible right now, which is part of why the Israeli government, the Israeli coalition, has ended up moving further to the right, when it's possible to make peace, the Israelis tend to vote for people who want to make peace, and that is, you get a more centrist government. When there's not possible to make peace, they focus on other things like the threat from Iran or the economy and things that end up bringing in more conservative representatives in the government. So,
one of the things that I don't know how much of the show you've heard or what on Facebook, but on the plane ride home, which is an ungodly 10 or 11 hours.
I think it's longer than that.
Is it? Okay. I prayed to God starting a couple weeks out because my assistant, Jill, reminded me that she really felt sorry for anybody who had to sit next to me that whole time. Because she's right. I'll want to have conversations. Mm-hmm. And so I prayed to God to give me people on the right or the left of me that was okay with having conversations. And on the way home, the woman that sat to the left of me, the window seat, is a retired United States Army officer who is married to a man who's still in the Army. They're stationed in Oklahoma. She's got 3 children. And oh, by the way, she's 100% Palestinian. Mm-hmm. And she was over there doing a documentary on the plight of the Palestinian people. There's a lot of things she said that I'm sure the two of you would never agree on. Mm-hmm. In fact, she's going to be on the radio with us Thursday by phone. You're welcome to listen in or call in or even come in and sit there if you want to. But one of the things she agreed to was that there's nobody representing Palestine that we can trust in any negotiations. What are you going to do? Trust Hezbollah? You're going to trust Hamas? Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I mean, that's part of the problem is you haven't had a Palestinian election in a long time. I mean, you're dealing with a leader right now who was elected for a 4-year term and is serving in his 11th or 12th year at this point.
Really? Who is that?
Mahmoud Abbas.
Okay.
So the Palestinians basically are represented by people who represent small factions of the population. And so she's correct that probably the majority of the population doesn't have any good representation at all. The people who would represent the interests of civilians who simply want prosperity and good health care and that kind of stuff aren't able to step up at all. And the fact is that Western governments, in fact, really all the governments of the world, have ended up supporting sides of this that don't represent the civilians.
It's just a political hot potato, isn't it? It just keeps getting bumped down the road. The
civilians' life was better when the Israelis were in full control than it has been since the Palestinian Liberation Organization took over in '93. And that's sad because it wasn't all that great before then. I mean, it really has deteriorated. They don't have a good leadership. And the other thing is that both Israelis and Palestinians would benefit from a good social and economic relationship. You could have a really strong economic engine there. I mean, what would happen? You spent time in Bethlehem. What would happen if you had Disney operating out of Bethlehem without the security you've got? I mean, how many tourists would go there? So the reality is the Palestinians would be vastly better off if you had the ability of people to cross back and forth the border in freedom and security.
Frank?
Could you pronounce this word for me? It's Allophyli. It means foreigners in the Septuagint.
Septuagint?
And that's
Greek?
the idea. Well, I'm not sure. But it's
and the Septuagint would be Greek.
Well, it's the idea that Philistine is Palestine. You can't get around that. If Philistine is Palestine. So these people, in essence, are foreigners in a foreign land. There was never any real Palestinian state. Do you agree?
Well, I mean, there has not been a Palestinian state. So if you go back, you go to the Ottoman Empire. I mean, just starting with the Ottoman Empire alone, you're going almost 500 years of there not being a Palestinian state, going from the Ottoman Empire to the British Mandate The British were supposed to be keeping the land to develop a Jewish homeland through the 1920s. They bailed on that, ended up separating off the Palestinian land and then trying to redivide the rest of the land. So you end up with the land going Ottoman Empire, British Mandate, Jordan occupation, and from 1948 to 1967, and then the Israelis take over land that is basically disputed, unclaimed land. There's good reason to believe that Israel has a right to all of the land, and that the purpose, when the Israelis brought in the Palestinian Liberation Organization, their goal was to figure out how to separate off the Palestinian population, how to create something that hadn't existed before, a Palestinian-led entity that would allow the Palestinians to be separate from Israel. It was not to try to reestablish something that had existed before, which is the way a lot of people look at the peace process. The way that the recent UN Security Council vote looks at it is if the Palestinians had land that they lost to Israel. They didn't have land they lost to Israel. You can make the claim that private landowners should be compensated for land that Israel took because their private land ownership has rights and private landowners have rights. But governmentally, not the case.
All right, we're going to take our next break and give Pastor Rabbi an opportunity to take a breath and come back with your phone calls, your questions, your texts, 515-244-0077. And if you want to text something, it's 809-0993. That's the Service Legends Truth Talk text line, brought to you by First Call Bail Bonds. Okay, we're coming back. I'm J. Michael McCoy. Thanks for listening. This is Mac's World on The Truth. Yep, The Truth.
Credit cards are like grandkids. They love you, sometimes get out of control, and it's fun to get a new one. Who can stop them from piling on?
Hi, I'm Tom Coates with Consumer Credit of Des Moines. At the end of the day, you can return the grandkids, but you're stuck paying off bad credit card debt. We'll help you put the fun back into using credit cards responsibly. Right, kids?
Yeah! If you need help getting credit cards off your back, call Consumer Credit of Des Moines.
Hi, my name is David Burrier, your Hope Coach. I host a live weekly talk show called I've Been There every Thursday afternoon at 5:30, right here on webcast1live.com, and on my weekly radio program Saturday mornings at 10 on Truth Network 99.3 FM. I interview common everyday people who have survived incredible life challenges and who testify to God's faithfulness in the midst of their storms. So join me as we bring a message of hope and encouragement. Everybody needs hope. I know, because I've been there.
Hey everybody, I brought Northern Lights Pizza! And it's got Graziano sausage!
Rock and Prevention is celebrating 25 years of creating a caring community. We want to say thank you to the tens of thousands of Rock High School mentors that have carried our message of health, love, and encouragement to over 1.5 million children, teachers, and parents. Our mentors teach children methods and skills to prevent bullying and drug use. Thank you to all the school administrators, teachers, and counselors for their opportunity to serve you. Rock on, fair citizens. Rock on. This is Pat McManus for Rock and Prevention, the Richard O. Jacobson Foundation, and this station.
From the RE/MAX Real Estate Concept Studios, this is Webcast One Live. From the RE/MAX Real Estate Concept Studios, this is Webcast One Live.
Bring your tithe and bring your shame. Bring your guilt and bring your pain. Don't you know that's not your name? You will always be much more to me.
21 minutes after 4 o'clock, 4:21 in the afternoon, third day of January in the Lord's year 2017. Glad to have you along. Our first official day back on the air for 2 weeks here after leaving for a week in Bethlehem and Jerusalem and Tel Aviv and Bethany, and that's it, right?
Well, we did some touring. We went to Jericho.
I went to Jericho. That was incredible. All right, now, Pastor David Kaufman, Rabbi, I said pastor, I'm sorry.
You're used to everybody being a pastor, Mac.
Rabbi David Kaufman is here with us today talking a little bit about what we learned over there about the, I'm going to call it the Palestinian plight. And I said earlier, David, I haven't gone 180 degrees at all. I witnessed firsthand the plight of the Palestinian people, and it seems to me it happens because the Israelis and the Palestinians can't seem to agree on anything, and the Israelis have the mallet, the handle, or the hammer, and every time Palestine decides to launch a rocket over into Jerusalem or wherever they do, it makes it harder and harder for anyone to feel any compassion for the Palestinians.
Mm-hmm. I think that's pretty accurate. Go
ahead. No.
Go ahead, Frank.
Let me ask this: They try to put self-defense of Israel and the Palestinian issue on equal footing. Yeah. Because every time Israel goes to defend themselves, you'll get somebody in the United States that will want Israel to, quote unquote, show restraint. And like Max says, it's almost like the United States is a sovereign country. If Texas started lobbing missiles into D.C., how long do you think it would take Obama to come down and flatten Texas? Or if they tried to make a two-state solution out of D.C.? I mean, in other words, we're holding Israel to an unreasonable standard that when they go to try to defend themselves and clear out this rat's nest of the people who's trying to torpedo the peace process, they get accused of targeting civilians and not showing restraint.
Yeah, and even the argument that they're not showing restraint is unfair. I mean, look, you're talking about a modern military that has an overwhelming ability to wage warfare that could easily kill tens of thousands of people. I mean, you're talking the response to Texas would be an invasion that would probably cost tens of thousands of lives, not hundreds of lives.
Right.
And they wouldn't be doing a handful of surgical strikes from drones. I mean, the reality is that Israel conducts extreme restraint under the circumstances. That what it's doing is very restrained already, and that's what the Israelis would argue. They fight a much more restrained, targeted kind of warfare than any other army in the history of the world. The question of what to do about Palestinian suffering is a big one. I mean, look, many of the Palestinians' families have been living on the land for a very long time. You brought up the Philistines. Right. I would highly doubt that anybody, first of all, the Philistines ceased to exist as a people a long time ago. Even in biblical times, they really ceased to exist. But that doesn't mean that you don't have people who've been on the land for a long time. Many of the Palestinians may well have Jewish descent. You have Palestinians that have Christian descent. You have Palestinians that have immigrated from all over the place into the land. There are Palestinians who are not Arab or who have very little percent of their racial makeup as Arab. You have red-headed, relatively Caucasian Palestinians out there in addition to the Arab ones. Right. these are, there have been a lot of movement of peoples over time into the land. But we try to look at this as the Jews claim to have connection to Jerusalem for 3,000 years somehow means that the Muslims' connection to Jerusalem for 1,350 years is irrelevant. It doesn't really work that way. We're dealing with very long periods of time, and people develop connections, strong connections over long periods of time, and they can claim to be connected to the land, rightly so.
Well, let me ask you this about the Ayatollah Khomeini.
Now we're going way afield here. Iran.
Well, it pertains to the Israel's right to survive, or we're the great Satan and Israel's the smaller Satan. Now, a lot of people, unless you speak Arab, I don't know what Khomeini says, but people say he says death to America.
Oh, he does say
death
death
to Israel.
Yeah, they do. There's a standard chants at rallies in Iran: death to America, death to Israel.
Okay, so if you have potentially Iran funding Hamas or funding some of these terrorist organizations that's out to take Israel out, in other words, you got the people in the center. Some of them, like I was mentioning last hour, some of the Israel and the Palestinians may be intermarried. They may have, there may be people that have grandkids between these unions.
Yeah.
They want to live in peace. They don't want this constant turmoil. But you got Iran out there funding terrorist organizations to take the peace process out.
Well, in Iran used to fund Hamas more than they do now. I'm not sure that they fund Hamas at all at this point because of the Syrian civil war split Iran away from the Muslim Brotherhood, and Hamas is a Muslim Brotherhood organization. So Hamas is actually struggling now because it's more because of what Egypt is doing to it than what Israel has. Israel is still allowing humanitarian aid in and all of that stuff. There was a period of time when Egypt wasn't even doing that, when Egypt had completely sealed that border, and Egypt is doing its best to prevent any kind of flow from Gaza into Egypt because they're afraid not only of the Hamas fighters in Gaza, but more radical people like who are connected to the Islamic State or who are connected to Islamic Jihad, which is an organization backed by Iran. And Israel and Egypt have actually had to coordinate together to help Hamas fight the Islamic State in Gaza. That's how bad things are. You want to talk about people who are suffering. Think about the fact when the good guy who's doing the best is the one who's making your life utterly miserable because the alternative is somebody who's worse. That's what you've got going on in Gaza right now.
Right.
What's going on in many places in the West Bank, however, especially the northern West Bank, is the opposite of that. The northern West Bank Palestinians, many of them are doing really well. They're prospering. Ramallah is very successful. There are Palestinian billionaires, much less 100 millionaires. There are people who are involved in the high-tech industry, medical field, you name it. Right. And they're looking at this and saying we need peace right now because the prosperity of the people could ramp up so much if we can get this done. My thought for a long period of time was that observer state status was a good idea for the Palestinians because if the Israelis maintain external border control, then they can have less internal border control, and that allows for more people to cross the border easier, and that's going to give the Palestinians much more opportunity to work in Israel and for there to be trade back and forth, which helps the Palestinian economy tremendously and will help quality of life tremendously.
There's absolutely no manufacturing in Bethlehem. The only thing they have. Is that right?
And the Christians have bailed on Bethlehem. You went from it being a large Christian population to it being overwhelmingly Muslim.
And why have they bailed on it?
Because it's not safe. The southern West Bank, including all the way up to Bethlehem, is significantly influenced by Hamas. And Hamas is not good to live under. No one wants to live under Hamas. The southern West Bank is suffering in a big way. The northern West Bank is much better, but Israeli Arab Christians are the ones who are really doing well, which is where you get Father Nadaf in Nazareth is encouraging people in his community. He's a Greek Orthodox priest. He's encouraging people in his community to go into the Israeli military. There was a long period of time when Israeli Arabs weren't serving in the Israeli military. But now they look around the region and they say Israel's the only safe place for Christians to be.
So most Christians have abandoned Bethany or Bethlehem or wherever, and they've moved into Jerusalem.
Well, yeah, I mean, or they've moved to the United States, or they've moved other places. And, Israel is not completely free of responsibility for this. If you have a choice of living in some place where you are relatively unsafe, where you can't travel, where you can't practice your faith the way you want because you're threatened by the local authorities, and you can't conduct business where you need to in Israel, because there are a lot of, especially for Christians, there's a lot of things going on across the border, then people want to move. They want to go somewhere else. So a lot of the Palestinian Christians who are especially in Bethlehem left because life under anybody was bad. Because they don't have the ability to live freely.
So we have the Obama and the politicians, Trump, in the mix and playing politics with Israel.
Yeah.
And there's talk that Obama may have a resolution or try to stir up a resolution amongst the UN to declare Palestine a state.
Yeah.
You mentioned that Palestine actually is safer under a one-state solution.
Yeah. Well, no, not a one-state solution. What I think is as an observer state with some sort of larger border, more contiguous territory than it's got now. It has to have the ability to function. But I just think that if you have a hard separation where the Palestinians are controlling their external borders fully, the Israelis won't be able to trust what's going on internally. Right. They won't be able to let people come in, and you're gonna go from having hour or 2 hour long waits to get into Israel to having 5 or 6 hour long waits to get into Israel. If that happens, you basically terminate any kind of economic relationship between the countries.
So Netanyahu says a two-state solution is now dead in the water.
Well, it's dead in the water. It's not dead. I mean, the reason it's dead in the water is because there's no ability to make progress toward it. It's not it wouldn't be good for either people to go for a single-state solution. Because a single-state solution is ultimately going to lead to civil war. It's going to maintain. It takes you back to 1993 with the situation where the Israelis say we have to separate from the Palestinians at all costs, right? Or not all costs, but at some cost. You're right back there. It doesn't solve the problem. It just obliterates the solution that was attempted. And the reality is, for the Palestinians, they're better off having control over their population. 90% of the Palestinian population plus is under the Palestinian Authority right now. They just need the ability they need more territory to grow, and they need to be able to separate reasonably.
All right, let's take our break, and then we'll come back. Rabbi David Kaufman is here, and I just had I guess it's a tweet from Tom Coates, and he said, "You're great."
I appreciate Tom.
I mean, coming from Tom.
Hi to Tom.
Hi to Tom. All right, we're coming back live here on The Truth. Yep, it's The Truth in Mac's World.
Northern Lights Pizza's amazing garlic butter makes amazing breadsticks. Now available in 12-ounce bottles at Northern Lights, Hy-Vee, and Graziano's.
Northern Lights Pizza. I'm Brian Leach, owner of Service Legends, and my position is Chief Talent Officer.
I'm Nicholas Wonderscheid.
I am Bernie Homs.
And I'm the Service Manager.
Marketing Director and Client Relations Manager.
Everything that we do is about ensuring that we exceed your expectations.
Our clients are important to us. 100% satisfaction.
We're not just focused on heating and cooling. That's the easiest part of our job, actually, is fixing furnaces and air conditioners.
Everyone that we come in touch with, we want to improve lives.
Bottom line is, we've got our installation guarantees, 25% energy savings guarantee, comfort guarantee, temperature selection guarantee, property protection guarantee.
100% satisfaction guaranteed, fixed rate or it's free.
All of those guarantees are backed up with a 100% money-back guarantee to hold ourselves accountable to making sure that you get what you're after.
Just fixing the problem today. If they have another problem 5 days down the road, it's still fixed rate or it's free.
We use what's called straightforward pricing. Our technicians are going to give you an exact to-the-penny price on what it's going to take before they move forward with any repair. That way you know what to expect.
It's the same price every day.
No surprises.
If you get off work at 5 o'clock in the afternoon, you come home, you realize that, oh, my furnace is broken. Now you need to call somebody out that night. You shouldn't have to pay more for that.
We're guaranteeing service 24/7.
We run afternoons, evenings, nights, weekends. We're staffed to work that.
Phone rings at 3 in the morning. You'll get one of our representatives answering the phone every time.
We're not sending you out to Timbuktu in some call center. It's our Service Legend team members, our mission control team.
I'll take a call anytime.
And then they answer the phones the same way during the day as they do at night.
It's a great day at your service company. How can we make you smile?
That's the only way to provide true 24-hour service.
When you're able to let somebody actually live in their home safely when they weren't able to do that before, where they don't have to stay up at night and worry about, is the heat going to come back on? Are we going to freeze the pipes? Is the baby in the room next door going to be sick because they got too cold? When you're able to help somebody overcome challenges like that, that's impacting a life. That makes a difference. I get goosebumps thinking about it.
I love the team. I love the people that I work with.
We have fun, but we work hard.
I call them my ambassadors of legendary service. If you could just envision what that is, that's who we're sending to your home.
They literally will call in, pick up the phone and call and say, hey, I want to talk to your manager. And I get on the phone, they're like, that technician that was at my house was the greatest technician ever. That's cool to me.
We want to brighten people's days.
Every person that we have going into the house has gone through an extensive background check.
Drug testing, we have a very thorough interview process that 1 out of 140 people make it through.
If we promise you something, that's what you're going to get, no matter what.
We're here when you need us to protect the safety and comfort of your family.
If you're not happy, we're going to make it right.
If we're willing to put 100% money-back guarantee on what we do, what type of work do you think we do?
Give us a call. We're there for you 24/7, 365 days a year.
Enough said.
From the RE/MAX Real Estate Concept Studios, this is Webcast One Live.
God, I'm running for your heart. I'm running for your heart. Till I am a soul on fire.
It's 22 minutes before the top of the hour. Top of the hour, Salem Radio Network News. And then Hank, the Bible Answer Man, and 1-888 Ask Hank. He'll be on today live. It is a live worldwide program that you can only hear from 5 to 6 Central Daylight Time on 99.3 The Truth. All right, I'm J. Michael McCoy. Welcome back. If you're finding us for the first time, we are a talk radio station that loves Jesus. Now, some people would say, okay, then you're a Christian radio station, if you want to call us that. But that would be like calling a country station a country and western station. Now, it's not really the best definition, because there's lots of programs on this radio station, especially after 1 o'clock in the afternoon and until midnight, that are politics, lifestyle, family-oriented, and then there's sermons. There's wonderful messages from midnight till about 11 a.m. on the radio from some of the best preachers around the world. And I'm sorry, Rabbi, but we don't have you on the station. You know, if you just believe in Jesus, that he's the Messiah and everything, we could get you your own show. David Kaufman, Rabbi David Kaufman, is our guest today as we continue these conversations about what Bob and I and Craig and Dick and Betty discovered over in Israel. And one of the things that I just had no idea, God totally blindsided me with this. And that would be the politics that was going on. I didn't even think about it, to be honest with you. Ended up having a nice conversation with Bibi Netanyahu. And that was kind of like interviewing, be honest with you, it was kind of like interviewing a politician, especially a liberal politician. I asked a question, and I realized about 7 seconds later he was giving me his narrative, not the answer to the question. And I'm not criticizing him for that. That's what politicians do. But we had a lot of opportunity over there, especially when. What did you think of that thing that Trump tried to do with the UN peace proposal or the UN, whatever it was?
What do you mean? The
resolution?
Well, they were going to vote on it. And if I understand the story right, Trump called somebody in Syria or whatever, Egypt, and said, "Hey, we don't want this proposal even on the table, so take it off."
The Security Council resolution about the settlements.
Yes,
and then other nations proposed it anyway.
Right.
The Security Council resolution is seriously problematic. The United States had no reason to abstain from it. Security Council resolutions, they argue over the exact wording of every phrase that's in the document. You had John Kerry come out a couple days later and issue what the U.S. policy is, and the U.S. policy isn't even in agreement with what they let pass. So the argument that they needed to let this pass is not accurate at all. It basically acts as if the Palestinians have land that belongs to them that Israel is occupying when there has never been a Palestinian state. And experts who study the legal aspects of land acquisition by nations will tell you that that's not accurate. Just because the United Nations Security Council says something doesn't make it law.
Yeah, I understand that.
I've been doing quite a bit of research on that. The United Nations Security Council issues an opinion on the law, and that certainly kind of shifts attention in a direction, but it doesn't create law. They can't, for example, say Texas belongs to Mexico if they wanted to. It's not possible for them to do that. They have to follow established precedent in land acquisition. And so they just issued an opinion. But if anybody takes that to an actual court, that won't hold up. That opinion is not law. But anyway, the other thing that's happened, there's a lot of stuff that's happened as far as alliances go and a relationship between Israel and Egypt and the United States and Russia. We can talk at some point in time extensively. The reason that John Kerry's peace proposal didn't get brought to the United Nations Security Council, which is where I thought you were going, is because the Russians refused to back it.
Because the Russians aren't going to do anything with the Obama administration right now.
Well, it's not just that. It's this, the Russians are no longer an enemy of Israel. They no longer see Israel as an American proxy and that they're just going to fight against all the time. Russia actually has a relationship with Israel right now. The Russians even said that they weren't 100% behind the Security Council resolution on settlements and that they weren't going to support anything else. Because they're working with the Israelis on a lot of things related to Syria and related to counterterrorism, and they don't want to upset the Israelis anymore either.
Let me ask you, what is your opinion of Prime Minister Netanyahu? And if you were Prime Minister for a day or you could have your way in the process, what would you do to broker? Is there a deal to be brokered?
Well, I think that as far as the latter part, we're getting to the point where there really is a very small variance on what kind of peace proposal you could have. There's a certain amount of land, there's a certain area of land that would be necessary to create a Palestinian state. If they don't get it, you might as well forget the whole process. They have to have a certain amount of land. It has to be contiguous or virtually contiguous the whole way. It's got to include some relatively prime land. Israel can't just give them the worst land and say we're going to take all the best land. It can't be land that isolates the Palestinian communities, and it has to include some stuff near Jerusalem. It probably has to include Abu Dis, which is the upper class Arab Israeli neighborhood east of Jerusalem, and that may well become the Palestinian capital. As far as Netanyahu goes, Netanyahu, if he were in the United States, would be a conservative Democrat, maybe a liberal Republican. He is a social libertarian. He's nowhere close to in line with conservatives in the United States on social issues. He is more so on economic issues, and he's very much so on foreign policy. And what happens in Israel is he is actually very close to the political center in Israel. This is what's causing problems for the political left. If you look at virtually any polls that come out right now about what future elections would look like in Israel, all of them have Likud and Benjamin Netanyahu in whatever coalition is formed. And not only that, he can form a coalition with the left or form a coalition with the right, depending on how he wants to do it.
Well, let me ask you this where the Dome of the Rock is, or whatever this Islam temple is.
Yeah.
This is the old temple of the Jerusalem temple, right?
Yeah, so what happens is that Islam claimed for itself holy sites that belonged to Christians and Jews. I mean, that's what, when it was founded.
Okay, so you have a certain number of, I don't know, if I'm using the correct terminology, but Orthodox Jews who are looking forward to the Messiah yet to come.
Yeah.
They want the temple to be restored, and they want the animal sacrifices to kick back up. I assume they would want this ground where the temple, where this Dome of the Rock stands, to reestablish the temple?
Well, so the issue with that is that you either try to hasten something by making it happen on your own, or you can wait for God to do it, right?
Right.
So essentially what the Orthodox have decided is when the Messiah comes, God will figure it out. No, if the Messiah shows up in Jerusalem tomorrow, you're probably not going to have the problem of Muslims combating the Messiah. They would see the Messiah just like the Jews would see the Messiah and the Christians would see the Messiah, and that would be the end of the discussion. I come from a tradition that doesn't believe in a individual as a Messiah. We believe in a messianic age that we bring about, working with other people to make the world a better place. It's much harder for us. I don't see a scenario where that happens easily. I don't see a time where God reaches down and just makes everything work. But for the Orthodox, their belief is that they only can do that when certain things happen, and that God will make those certain things happen, and that'll move the process forward.
All right, we got to take our last break. We'll come back. We're live with Rabbi David Kaufman here in Mac's World on 99.3 FM. The Truth.
Northern Lights Pizza's amazing garlic butter makes amazing breadsticks. Now available in 12-ounce bottles at Northern Lights, Hy-Vee, and Graziano's.
Northern Lights Pizza. I'm Brian Leach, owner of Service Legends, and my position is Chief Talent Officer.
I'm Nicholas Wonderscheid.
I am Bernie Homs,
And I'm the Service Manager.
Marketing Director and Client Relations Manager.
Everything that we do is about ensuring that we exceed your expectations.
Our clients are important to us. 100% satisfaction.
We're not just focused on heating and cooling. That's the easiest part of our job, actually, is fixing furnaces and air conditioners.
Everyone that we come in touch with, we want to improve lives.
Bottom line is, we've got our installation guarantees, 25% energy savings guarantee, comfort guarantee, temperature selection guarantee, property protection guarantee.
100% satisfaction guaranteed. Fixed rate or it's free.
All of those guarantees are backed up with a 100% money-back guarantee to hold ourselves accountable to making sure that you get what you're after.
Just fixing the problem today. If they have another problem 5 days down the road, it's still fixed rate or it's free.
We use what's called straightforward pricing. Our technicians are going to give you an exact to-the-penny price on what it's going to take before they move forward with any repair. That way you know what to expect.
It's the same price every day.
No surprises.
If you get off work at 5 o'clock in the afternoon, you come home, you realize that, my furnace is broken. Now you need to call somebody out that night. You shouldn't have to pay more for that.
We're guaranteeing service 24/7.
We run afternoons, evenings, nights, weekends. We're staffed to work that.
Phone rings at 3 in the morning. You'll get one of our representatives answering the phone every time.
We're not sending you out to Timbuktu in some call center. It's our Service Legend team members, our mission control team.
I'll take a call anytime.
And then they answer the phones the same way during the day as they do at night.
It's a great day at your service company. How can we make you smile?
That's the only way to provide true 24-hour service.
When you're able to let somebody actually live in their home safely when they weren't able to.
From the RE/MAX Real Estate Concept Studios, this is Webcast One Live. From the RE/MAX Real Estate Concept Studios, this is Webcast One Live.
And love explode and bring the dead to life. solution.
10 minutes before 5 o'clock. 5 o'clock, Salem Radio Network News. And then Hank, the Bible Answer Man, at 1-888-ASK-HANK. You'll be hearing more and more about the trip as we move forward. And I can promise you that at some point the trip will be, I don't know. I hope it's just a trip. I hope it's not something that dominates our conversation for very long, but it's going to be for a while. Okay, today I've got Rabbi David Kaufman in to hear the Israeli side of the plight of the Palestinian people that came to my attention while I was over there, and also because I sat on an airplane next to a Palestinian woman who is a journalist and doing her PhD work, and she was doing a documentary on the plight of the Palestinian people. And she's Palestinian. She lives in Oklahoma. She's a retired Army person, the United States Army. Her husband's still in the Army. They have 3 beautiful children together. But this woman is passionate about the plight of the Palestinian people. And so she's going to be on Thursday via phone. She lives in Oklahoma. And I wanted to get David on today, and hopefully you'll be able to listen to that show or the podcast or whatever, or even call in. Because to hear her talk, the Israelis and the Americans are totally suffocating, my word, not hers, but suffocating the Palestinian people with the long-term hope is that you get them all bunched up into one little place called Bethlehem or Bethany or wherever it is, and eventually they succumb and are no more. Or they move away far, far away and leave the Israelites alone.
Well, I mean, and you have a situation in which their population has increased dramatically since 1948 and increased even more rapidly since 1967. So you have this bizarre situation where they talk about being wiped out at a time when their population is increasing, and their articles about the Palestinians outpopulating the Jews in the land in the next 5 years, even in some articles. It's contradictory. What's really going on, to be honest, is this idea that there's no end in sight, that you have no way of achieving something that everybody's going to be happy about, and who's in control of doing it. And no one wants to say that the Israelis are in control of it. I mean, they don't want to admit that. And because they don't want to admit that, the Israelis are unable to do anything, because if the Israelis propose a solution, the Palestinians will simply say, we want more. So instead of negotiating, I mean, the reason that things fell apart in 2000, there could have been a peace agreement in 2000. People don't want to admit that either, especially on the Palestinian side. There was an agreement on the table waiting for Yasser Arafat's signature, and he said no. So, which is probably a better agreement than they're going to be able to get in the foreseeable future, if ever, from an Israeli government.
And that agreement gave the Palestinians some land that
something like 85% of the West Bank, with some of Jerusalem, which they would never offer anymore. Much more border control than the Israelis will allow them to have for security reasons at this point for the foreseeable future, because of what happened in Gaza and what's going on in Syria. There's no way that they can allow free, open borders.
There's a certain segment of the Protestant denominations that feel that literal Jerusalem plays some part into end-time biblical prophecy as spoken of by Daniel in Revelation. Mm-hmm. So obviously it's in their interest, and I think some of these are the ones that kind of propped up Israel as a state in 1948, that this temple's got to be restored and certain things have to happen in Israel. Are these part of the players? I mean, are you at liberty to name the players that you feel is torpedoing the peace process in Israel, and is potentially the right-wing Christian conservatives, and which I'm not a part of, that believe that Israel plays this end-time prophecy?
What I would say is I don't think end time prophecies really have anything to do with the problems in the peace process. I think that religion does. There are people who believe that all the land belongs to the Jews,
right?
And they do discourage Israel from conceding any land. There's no question about that, whether they're Jews or Christians, and there are a lot more Christians
that's pushing that
that argue that side. But I don't think that that's the primary issue. The primary issue for the Israelis is security, and making concessions that would result in a West Bank that looks like Gaza and is firing thousands of rockets down on Israel is simply an impossibility for the Israeli government. Any solution that results in that is not an option. So it doesn't matter what the borders are. It doesn't matter whether you're talking about 95% of the West Bank belonging to a Palestinian state or 50%. If whatever it is turns into a place that's firing rockets into Israel, they can't tolerate it. The only solution to that would be reinvading it and taking it all over. And then having a lot of bloodshed, not only when they do that, but after they do that. So right now, the primary problem is that most of the alternatives are worse than the status quo. Most of the achievable alternatives are worse than the status quo, meaning that the things that Israel is willing to offer, that the Palestinians are willing to accept at the moment, won't get us anywhere. What the Palestinians really want are bad enough that the Israelis will rather deal with the status quo. What the Israelis are willing to offer the Palestinians isn't good enough for them to be willing to change the status quo, and that's the problem.
All right. Thank you very much for coming in today. I appreciate it. You vocalize it very well. I do hope you get a chance to listen on Thursday or listen to the podcast at least.
I will do my best.
I just, not even on the radio, I just want your opinion because I honor it. And this Palestinian woman really touched me with the interviews that she had. And it wasn't just her opinion. She had interviews with the mayor of Bethlehem and her grandmother and somebody else in Palestine. And I don't know.
Life is terrible for them.
It really
No
is.
question.
Yeah, it really is. All right. Pastor or Rabbi David Kaufman in today. Appreciate that. Jebediah has been producing. Bob, any more texts we got that you want to share?
No.
Frank didn't send any more in saying how good Frank was?
No.
All right.
Let me hurry up. I got a couple seconds left.
Frank's here, and somebody asked me what I missed about home, and I said, well, I missed my puppies, and I missed some of my pastors and some of my guys in Bible study. And then very quickly, this person said, well, did you miss Frank?
And he said, yes. Can't wait to get back.
I mean, that's like sitting on wet toilet seats and thinking that's fun. I mean, I don't know. Glad you're with us. Glad we're back. We'll see you tomorrow at this same time. Hank the Bible Answer Man is next. Remember, resentments lead to unforgiveness, and unforgiveness leads to a nasty case of the accuser. So forgive who you need to forgive, because as you forgive, you shall be forgiven. I'll see you at church.